Yep.
Hello. Uh, so today here with me, I have Coach Taylor. And I'm just going to ask him to start off just by introducing himself and telling us a little bit about himself.
Yeah. Thank you, Denise. Dr. D'Amico, I really appreciate the honor of being a part of the Martin Luther King Day celebration. And when we honor the life of him and his works and what he's done for our country of America. And wanted to make sure that a lot of the things that I talk about are blended with his vision, because of a lot of what that I do and how I live is because of the vision of what some of the visions that he has expressed throughout his lifetime. But yes, my name is Eric Taylor. I am a coach here at St. Francis University. I'm a graduate here of St. Francis University of 1998. I got my bachelor's of accounting degree here for the 4 years that I was here. And then after my attaining my degree here, I went overseas to expose my talents of basketball for 12 years. And so in that 12 years, played in a lot of countries, learned to speak a few languages along the way, and just happy to come back to the university to help in any manner that I can, whether it be in the community, in this case with basketball, with my expertise of basketball, and being able to engage the St. Francis community with activities, with social activities, which we will talk about later, but also just to lend my efforts as an alumni of this university in whatever capacity that I can for the positive good.
Great. And in fact, one of the reasons I thought of you as a speaker for Martin Luther King Day is I know about the Hike for Humanity that you organized last semester. So can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yes, yeah, the Hike for Humanity was something that was totally grassroots level. I didn't copy and paste from any other hikes of humanity that may exist. It was something that came to my brainchild with the help of a couple of friends of mine who I had talked to and just said, like, you know, what can be done, or is there something that could be positive? And we bounced some ideas off of each other in my small think tank. And to be honest, I said, you know what? I think this is something we can do with everything that's going on with the coronavirus pandemic that's happening, which with where we have to socially distance ourselves and be wary of the nature of the virus, of different types of spores that can infect human to human really quickly. And of course, we totally are empathetic and sympathetic to people who have lost their loved ones to the coronavirus pandemic. But in my mind, I've said, like, what can we do um, on the outside that also can engage into the social engagement, positive engagement that we had to address when we dealt with the social pandemic that we also had last year, when we have talked about the Black Lives Matter movement and every other movement that took place last year as a result of the police brutality. And so that, combining those and trying to figure out a way where the St. Francis community can get together was the brainchild that I thought about and said, like, okay, you know what? We're going to do something simple. So the Hike for Humanity was born last year for that purpose. And the purpose was to get people together, to walk in silence, because silence walking is scientifically powerful, because you can walk in nature, be one with nature, and walk with your fellow human being. And without any conversation, it's just really nice to walk beside someone, regardless of where they are and where they came from, in the time like we had in America. And so that Hike for Humanity was born last year from that brainchild, and it actually I thought was a big success and had a lot of feedback from faculty like yourself, and then faculty around the campus, and also current students that we had that had sent essays to my desk that said that they had a wonderful time doing that. So the Hike for Humanity, I think, was was a big success, and I hope to do it again, not to push it on anyone else, but of course at a convenient agenda for people.
That's fantastic. I know you also have an initiative you've developed called the Beacon of Light Training Initiative, which I think ties in to the Hike for Humanity, to Martin Luther King Day. So
Yes.
could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, yes. And, to add with the Hike for Humanity and also what we're going to talk about with the Beacon of Light initiative, these were both branches of Martin Luther King's beloved community. Martin Luther King talked about the beloved community before he was brutally assassinated 50 to 60 some years ago. And he talked about the beloved community. I quote from, because I'm a huge avid reader of the King Center, where his children, they have they are in control of the King Center, and they send out a lot of messages, and they're in a lot of community initiatives. But Dr. King's beloved community, and I'll quote to you from the King Center, as we talk about the Hike for Humanity and the Beacon of Light initiative. The Dr. King's beloved community is a global vision which actually can relate to St. Francis University's mission. The Dr. King's beloved community is a global vision in which all people can share in the wealth of the earth. In the beloved community, poverty, hunger, and homelessness will not be tolerated because international standards of human decency will not allow it. Racism and all forms of discrimination, bigotry, and prejudice will be replaced by an all-inclusive spirit of sisterhood and brotherhood. So, I mean, that is in essence what, without elaboration, what Dr. King had talked about or expressed in that beloved community, and has been passed on through generations and generations. And now, even more today, we need this. This ideal, this ideology. I think this ideology right now in America, at a time where we have a social pandemic and the health pandemic, something that we can also adopt to our everyday life for the sake of his message. And look at Dr. King as where he was, where he was from, what color he is. Look at the message. Look at the message, what he was trying to promote. And his message is about peace and understanding. And so yeah, the Beacon of Light initiative was also a brainchild of mine. And so while I was in Europe for the 12 years between from leaving St. Francis University to coming back, I looked at America from an independent eye. And so this is where the essence of the Beacon of Light comes from. I didn't have a political agenda. I was independent in thought. I was able to travel within the countries of Poland and Germany and Greece and Israel and France. I can only name a few of the countries that I went to, but in those 12 years, just those few countries, I grew an independence from America, but still had the soul of America within me, being an American in Europe, to say, there are some things that I think that we can change about America, or things that I think could help change some type of system in America. And it wasn't about changing the entire political system. It was about the police brutality. Because even then, being in Europe, when I watch CNN or watch a cable news network that was English, I would see news reports of things that were happening within the social network of America. And it was things that I never had to deal with. I grew up in suburban Cincinnati, and then, coming to St. Francis, being in Europe, kind of independent from the social struggle. Because in Europe, I'm looking at it from a lens of playing basketball. I didn't have to deal with much of a social struggle in Europe, because it was mainly independent, where I was there to perform a service. But anyways, this Beacon of Light initiative, all of it came together last year when we had the movement, when there was a social movement about justice. So this Beacon of Light initiative touches on Martin Luther King's vision of tolerance, inclusivity, and it has a little bit of diversity training within. And one of the bullet points of the Beacon of Light initiative talks about the being able to engage in friendly conversation with people that don't look like you, people that may be of a different culture than you. That is something that I learned from Europe, where you had to go into a foreign country, and even though you were American and you spoke English, you know what? I have to go engage with my Polish brother or my Polish sister, or my French brother, my French sister, my Greek brother, Greek sister, that didn't speak any language other than me, and of course was a different color than I was. But I wanted to learn about their culture. And once I learned about their culture, in each country that I went to, I learned about something about their culture that actually bridged the gap and made the unknown a little bit more inviting. And so I thought that from that idea, and shared with Martin's idea about learning about each other, this can bridge the gap of the unknown, that can make conversation a little bit more inviting, to learn about different people's stories, because everyone has the same story. They come from different lenses. Some people come from here and some people come from there. But if we all can understand each other a little bit, and not fault people for where they're coming from or what they look like or what color they are, that's one of the ways we can bridge the gap of the unknown, which sometimes can fragment our biases and fragment our prejudices. And that's where some of the evils of the idea or the act of racism, because I don't think the act of racism is evil. You know, people are acting on this racism evil. Not saying that people are evil. It's the act of racism that's evil. And that's where the Beacon of Light initiative came from. And so it had bullet points of making other friends that were not your color and not your culture. It had the funding of police, but they had to be diversity trained, where if they're policing communities of color, you know, if you had a white police officer policing a community of color, maybe learn about the community of color just so you can understand how the community works. A little bit of understanding just to navigate a little bit better, and having maybe a cross-culture companion to that you learned about on the police force, that could help you. And another bullet point was about hiring African-American males and females to police in the African-American male and female communities of color. And so before not going too deep into the Beacon of Light initiative, that's where the brainchild of it thought about those aspects of Dr. Martin Luther King's vision of the beloved community, where there's sisterhood and brotherhood and cohesion, social cohesion, and even the fact that we could still have policing, but we can have positive policing. You know, if you break the law, you break the law. But then the level that has been crossed time and time again, of course, is the level that we have all seen as Americans, as when policing becomes profiling, and it becomes a little bit when you have police that may be fearful of their lives, where they may use excessive force because they think that something may happen to them, so they use preemptive force. So that was the one thing that I really wanted to touch on, and that's where the Beacon of Light initiative really comes to light at a time where I think we definitely need it in the country.
Mm-hmm. It's just fascinating, and I'm glad you're able to talk with us about this today. And I think you've spoken a bit about Dr. King, and I'll just say again that the sort of organization, the center you mentioned was the King Center. And
yes.
If anyone's interested who's watching this video,
Yes.
I follow them on social media.
Yes.
Find them on social media, and there's just a wealth of information there.
Mm-hmm.
To help us think about what we're talking about today, which is how to take Dr. King's legacy and think about it for our times that we're
Yeah.
living in now.
Yes.
So yeah. So did you have any other thoughts about how all this ties into Dr. King's legacy? I mean, I think you've kind of already touched on that.
Mhm.
Anything else?
Yeah, with Dr. King's legacy, his vision of the beloved community, and the fact that he was a big proponent of loving thy neighbor, uh, um, about the content of character and not the color of skin. These are some of the excerpts of what he talked about in his "I Have a Dream" speech. Uh, you know, for all the listeners out there, go to this speech. It's an amazing speech. It's something that I touched on with the Beacon of Light initiative, where Dr. King talks about Abraham Lincoln, him signing the Emancipation Proclamation, King not knowing who Abraham was. He just knew about Abraham's legacy on how Abraham, in a fractured American society where you had this the Union and the Confederacy. um, Dr. King talks about a Republican white male who basically, in a fractured American society where you had fighting factions of the North and the South, said, you know what, we're going to free slaves. That's what we're going to do. And I don't care what you're thinking about me. Um, I believe that the African American people should be free. They should be free citizens of the American society. That was what Abraham Lincoln envisioned, and Martin touched on that in his "I Have a Dream" speech. And so now, in time, in the present, uh, his words, Abraham Lincoln's legacy, being a white Republican, and then you have Dr. King being who he is. He revered Abraham as not a savior, but just as a beacon of light. He talks about Abraham's signage of the Emancipation Proclamation being a beacon of light of opportunity. So the beacon of light actually comes from King's speech about the beacon of light that Abraham was. And so this is where we, I think, as a people, say, okay, well, how can I be a beacon of light to my fellow neighbor? Am I going to be a negative contagion, or can I be a positive contagion? Can I be a loving human being to my neighbor, no matter who he is or what he looks like, or she? Uh, and that is where the essence of the Beacon of Light initiative comes from. And then that's where the Hike of Humanity was born, from the Beacon of Light as an element. It was a bullet point in the Beacon of Light of making other friends. And so our second Hike for Humanity touched on that, to make another friend that may not be, they may not look like you, or dress like you, or be the same status of you, but bring them on the hike also. So that second Hike for Humanity was a part of that also.
Um, well, I think that ties right into my very last question as we wrap things up, which is, what advice do you have for our students today, our St. Francis University students, as we move forward in this world that we're in today?
Yeah, the advice I have, thank you for the question, is just I can only touch on the greatest commandment, the greatest biblical commandment. I do grab information from the Torah, the Quran, and also the Bible, in which I was raised on. The greatest commandment that was ever told was loving thy neighbor. This was the greatest commandment that was ever told. And so, like, for the students, not for this to be some religious session here, totally not. But I think if we listen to the message of the greatest commandment, moving forward, how can we love thy neighbor a little bit more? And it's not about being in love with thy neighbor. It's just about respecting, understanding, educating yourselves, being tolerant of other people. I think this is the best thing that we can do, is loving people, your neighbor, the person that's next to you, in your surrounding circles. And these circles can mirror to other circles, just like your Facebooks and your Instagrams and your Twitters and your Snapchats, how these circles of friends that you have within these social media circles, you can also be a beacon of light, of love and understanding to these circles. Maybe sometimes it's not about just expressing your own opinion, which you're entitled to, of course, as a free American. But sometimes it's about listening, which is also one of the most important forms of communication, to be a great listener and listen to someone else's story, because you never know who may be hurting. And they may need you as a mentor or a beacon for them to continue in life. And so that's one of the messages. That is the greatest message, of course, that I can say to the students moving forward on this day of celebration and reverence of the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. Live his legacy. It's not about a Hike for Humanity legacy. It's not about a Beacon of Light initiative, a legacy. It's about King's legacy. And as we, on this day, reflect and remember Dr. Martin Luther King, know that this is what he stood for. And this is how we're going to get America back to the whole united America that it can be, with the tolerance of cultures, and loving one neighbor without the prejudice and what they look like or where they came from.
That is a great message. And so I'll wrap up this call. And I just want to say thank you, Coach, for joining me. And thank you for talking about your perspective on Dr. King and his legacy, and all the great work you're doing at St. Francis and in the community.
Dr. D, thank you so much. And
Great to talk to
God
you.
bless you all.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Alrighty.